Welcome back to Analysis, where we've been discussing the condition of women in Afghanistan following President Karzai's veto of a controversial domestic violence bill. As NATO troops prepare to leave at the end of this year, there are growing concerns that civil liberties may be rolled back in the coming years after that. The latest veto by Karzai comes after a number of other controversial bills. And some analysts are concerned that this tactical positioning by the Afghan parliament and the conservatives in it could be designed to bring the Taliban back into the political process. Can Afghanistan become completely responsible for its own laws and defence? Remaining with me here to discuss this in the studio are Nazifa Hakbal, Second Secretary of the Human Rights and Women's Affairs Desk in the UK Afghan Embassy, Jawed Nader, who's Director of the British and Irish Agency's Afghanistan Group, sometimes known as BARG, and Shams Siddiqui, a political commentator. On the phone from Kabul, we're glad to be joined by Farida Ahmed Fakiri, who's the Education and Gender Manager at Afghan Aid. Welcome to you all. Let me start with you, Jawed Nader. I believe there is a group of women now who are trying to bring in a women's charter to get all the presidential candidates in the April election to agree to support reform. Is that right?
That's right, yes. The Afghan civil society actors, as well as some parliamentarians, have joined hand in establishing this charter and making all the 11 presidential candidates to sign up for it. And until then, they say that they will not support the presidential candidates in their bids to in the presidential race. Now, one of the interesting points in that charter is that the presidential candidates should vow that they will have women judges in the Supreme Council of the judiciary. Because the implementation of the EVO law, which is the Elimination of Violence Against Women law, has not been very satisfactory. A recent UN report said that it has been different in different parts of the country. And especially some civil society actors believe that after the controversy about the EVO law in the parliament, some judges choose not to use that law in their courts. So they have come up with other points about women's access.
And how many of the presidential candidates have signed up to this charter?
It is it is under negotiation now. Almost all the presidential candidates have said that they support women's rights in Afghanistan, and they do not want to have a rollback on these rights at all. Some of them more conservative ones have said that they support the women's rights within the framework of Islamic Sharia. Now, none of the presidential candidates say that we don't want Sharia. They all say so, but it is their interpretation from the Sharia, interpretation from the civil law that will matter to the women the most.
Well, Farida, let me bring you in, if I may. I mean, are you concerned that when NATO troops leave at the end of this year, there will be a rolling back of women's rights?
As a development worker, since I work for women development and different international organizations, after the fall of Taliban, there was a great hope for women there, and they made great progresses in terms of their rights. But 2014 it's looking like a dark future to women, because since according to the reports of human rights, recorded that there's a 26% increase of violence of women's rights. It means it looks like rolling back of the hard gains about women's rights.
So you think it's a very dark period, you're saying?
Yeah, because if the parliament in a country, both houses, upper houses and the parliament, that allowing that violence against women, yeah, it means that it gets worse and worse. And we by the meaning of being an Islamic country, and the laws acting criminally against women.
Well, Nazifa, are you of the same view? Is that your opinion too, that a dark period for women is coming?
I think it depends that how we Afghans manage the process of transition, or political transition and security transition. Of course, 2014 is a very critical year for Afghans, and it depends that how we could get from this period. But there are more bright prospects as well for Afghans ahead in 2014. Once we get the full responsibility of the security forces, once we have our election, our political transition successfully completed, and beside the support of international community and international NGOs, I think that we can, it won't be dark, but if we couldn't able to manage with these conditions, so perhaps maybe, but it is not 100% or totally we can see the darker society or darker for. But yeah, of course, with the women's rights is the EWO law or this law, or particularly many other kind of the procedures or attitudes inside the Afghan society. It exists, and we cannot imagine the Afghans just in a very short period of 10 years to be very brighter society, like or compare with the Western countries. But even with the regional countries around, or those countries that they are in war, Afghanistan is doing better, and the political participation, the economical, educational, and social participation of women in all walks of lives. This is of the evidence that still, though Afghanistan is a war-torn country, and still we are victims of wars.
Victims of war.
Yeah.
Let me put the point to you, Jared, then about the Taliban. I mean, do you think that the attempt is being made to appease the Taliban and to make it more acceptable for them to come into the political process?
I wouldn't think so. And the reason is that the Parliament of Afghanistan is not run by 1, 2, 3 political parties. We don't have such a political party system. So the parliamentarians represent their own thoughts. And at the moment, I don't see that they are very sympathetic to the Taliban cause. The government of Afghanistan has also always made it clear that if any peace negotiation is to take place, the preconditions would be that Taliban accept the current constitution of Afghanistan. None of the major presidential candidates have said that they will flout the constitution at all to appease the Taliban. If the Taliban are to come, they have to accept all the liberties that women, the minority groups, and other vulnerable groups have won in Afghanistan. Also, the constitution of Afghanistan is quite broad and sometimes vague. It does allow for all the Sharia-related laws to be enforced in Afghanistan. In fact, it says that none of the laws in Afghanistan would be enforced if it is in contradiction with the Sharia. So at the moment, both the Afghan government and the Taliban, they do not have any change in their views. So I think that if the Taliban are to come to Afghanistan and negotiate, they will have to be just as the other members of the parliament in Afghanistan or members of the cabinet who have accepted the constitution.
Well, Farida, let me come to you again. Do you think that there is a possibility of serious negotiations with the Taliban? And if so, would the women's rights position be reversed? Farida, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a serious prospect of negotiations between the next government and the Taliban? And if there were negotiations, could they produce a backward move for women?
I think there was some negotiation with the Taliban, as we heard from the news and the media. There will be some negotiation because still they will have their own policies and strategy as before. Maybe not like before, but somehow they will not accept at the whole the full respect and aspect of women human rights, but with limitation. They will criminalize the human rights. Will be there's some deals. There will be some deals about women's rights because they want peace. They will negotiate with Taliban. They will not consider about women's rights, and the gift they made since long.
Well, come back to you, Shams Siddiqui. I mean, the front runner in the presidential campaign is Mr. Rasool, I think, isn't that right?
That's right, yes.
Or is it Mr. Abdullah?
I think Mr. Rasool.
Mr. Rasool. Now, he's got a woman as a vice presidential candidate. So if he wins, do you think there would be it would really be a step forward for women?
I totally agree with your point of view there. It will be definitely a good way forward for, especially for Afghan women. I mean, recently I've done my recent publications on the Sharia and Islam on the rights of education of Afghan girls in Afghanistan. And from my research, I've gathered that the rights of girls in Afghanistan has improved a lot, and they have access more in employability and political parties. I mean, it's going to be a very positive point for Afghan women. So yes, it will be.
What do you think about the presidential candidates, Jawed? I mean, do you think we talked about whether or not they're going to sign this women's charter, but just based on their record and performance up till now, do you see a good chance that one of them, at least the one most likely to win, is going to be better than Karzai?
Well, that's a very difficult question. To be better than Karzai or worse than Karzai is a highly subjective question, really. But the leading contestants have made it very clear that they will safeguard the rights of women as enshrined in the Constitution of Afghanistan. Some of them, I will not name them for obvious reasons, some of the leading contestants have even made it clear that they would have policies about women's inclusion in the civil service, like a quota system. They have even talked about how the women parliamentarians will be empowered. So all these are good signs. There are a couple of presidential candidates who have been more conservative in their views. For example, funnily, one of them said that, I accept women's rights in Afghanistan, but let's say they should not be field engineers. Women should not be field engineers. It's a rough task. Let men do it. Mm-hmm. Now, these kind of views could also be heard, but they are not lead contestants.
Well, now, the Taliban, I mean, we know what they were like when they were in power after 1996. Is there any sign that they have modernized a little bit and changed their attitudes, or will it be the burqa again for everybody in Kabul if they come to power?
Well, it's a very difficult question because I'm not speaking from Taliban.
Not speaking from them, but your analysis of what they're saying.
Yeah, with the civil servant, with the government of Afghanistan, as other colleagues mentioned here at the table, that of course the negotiation with the Taliban will be when they accept the constitution of Afghanistan and the historical achievements of women in human rights that Afghanistan made it during the decades. But negotiation, we cannot deny the negotiation because we know that in any country, history has shown us that the solution of the war, the solution of crisis should be on negotiation. We cannot fight more than this with the opposition groups. But those opposition groups or those Taliban that they are fighting for, some are fighting very ideologically, and they will never accept the constitution and these other facts. But the split which is there and with the Taliban, some of them maybe they will have the tendency for accepting the achievements or the participation of women as it is in this. But it's up to the Peace Council of Afghanistan, Peace High Council, that they are in touch, or they are had some talks with them, and still some of the things are not so within the media. So, but this should be clear, especially to the public outside Afghanistan, that there are concerns that maybe the government of Afghanistan or the people of Afghanistan will deal. No, never. The people of Afghanistan came, and especially the women of Afghanistan, came a long way during this 10 years for these achievements. And the notion and the tendency of promotion or participation of women in all walks of life are there, and nobody can avoid it, nobody can ignore it.
So it's reality which the Taliban has to accept.
That's why the candidates, these candidates, every candidate, they had different kind of programs and their platform, which is encouraging.
I'm going to have to cut you off on that encouraging note because the time has run out. I'm sorry, the time has run out. I'm sure we'll come back to the issue of the Taliban and Afghanistan and the elections many times over the coming months. So it just remains me to thank our guests, Shams Siddiqui, Jawed Nada, Nafisa Hafbal, and Farida Akbar Fakiri in Kabul. Thank you for watching.